10 years ago, a girl falsely accused me of assaulting her. Because of that, my family was destroyed. I still remember the day it happened. It was a spring evening, the campus buzzing with students preparing for midterms. I had just finished my shift at the library, exhausted but content, knowing I had helped several students with their assignments. That's when I saw her, Emily Carter, stumbling drunkenly outside the student center. She was rich, beautiful, and untouchable. Everyone knew her name. She was the daughter of William Carter, a powerful businessman with deep ties to the university. She could fail every class and still graduate with honors simply because her family donated millions to the school. That night, she was drunk, too drunk to stand properly. "Nathan," she slurred, catching sight of me. She giggled, staggering closer. "You're always so serious. Lighten up, will you?" I sighed. I didn't hate Emily, but I had always kept my distance. I knew what girls like her could do to guys like me, scholarship students, nobodies with everything to lose. "Emily, you should go home." She pouted, stepping closer. "Oh, come on. Don't be boring." She placed a hand on my chest, her fingers cold against my skin. "You don't like me?" I took a step back. "You're drunk. Go home." That was my mistake. The rejection turned her playful smile into a scowl. Her eyes darkened with something I couldn't quite place. Anger, humiliation, entitlement. "You think you're too good for me?" she snapped, her voice sharp. "That's not what I—" "Screw you, Nathan," she spat, her face red with fury. Then she turned and stormed off into the night. I didn't think much of it. I should have. The next morning, I woke up to loud banging on my dorm room door. I barely had time to sit up before campus security barged in, followed by 2 police officers. "Nathan Reed?" "Yeah?" I rubbed my eyes, still groggy. "You need to come with us." A strange coldness spread through my chest. "What's going on?" I asked. No one answered. They dragged me across campus, past hundreds of students who turned to stare. Whispers filled the air. By the time I was forced into the dean's office, I already knew something was very, very wrong. Emily Carter sat across the room, crying. She looked small and fragile, her makeup perfectly smudged, her blonde hair slightly messy. Next to her sat her father, William Carter, a man who could crush people with a single phone call. I stared at her, completely confused. "That's him," Emily whispered. Her voice trembled, and she wiped her tears away with delicate fingers. He wouldn't take no for an answer. My blood ran cold. "What?" The dean, a man who had once praised me for my academic achievements, refused to meet my eyes. "Nathan," he said heavily, "Emily has accused you of assault." I couldn't breathe. "That's not true," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "She says you followed her after she left the student center," one of the officers explained. "She says you forced yourself on her." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "That's a lie." I turned to Emily, desperate. "You know that's a lie." She flinched, looking away. Her father tightened his grip on her shoulder, his expression dark and dangerous. "Mr. Reed, please calm down," the officer said. "Calm down?" I laughed, but it sounded hollow. "She's making this up." "We'll be conducting an investigation," the officer continued. "But in the meantime, Mr. Reed, you are placed on immediate suspension. You'll need to come to the station for questioning." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "Suspension?" My voice cracked. "You're suspending me for something I didn't do?" The dean finally looked at me. "Nathan, we have to take these allegations seriously." Emily sniffled. Her hands trembled in her lap. "I didn't want to say anything," she murmured, "but I was so scared." Lies. She wouldn't even look at me. The police took me in. The media picked up the story within hours. Scholarship student assaults billionaire's daughter. The school expelled me. The lawyers tore me apart, but there was no evidence. No bruises, no DNA, no witnesses. Still, it didn't matter. My name was ruined. My family was ruined. My father lost his job. My mother had a breakdown. They died within a year. My father from stress, my mother from grief. And Emily Carter moved on. She went to Yale, got a degree in business, and traveled the world. She never once looked back. But I did. For 10 years I lived in the shadows, watching, waiting, planning, and now here we are. Emily Carter just married me. And she has no idea. I married her. 10 years after she destroyed my life, Emily Carter became my wife. The wedding was grand, extravagant, exactly the kind of event the Carter family was known for. Hundreds of guests attended, dressed in designer suits and glittering gowns, sipping champagne under chandeliers worth more than what my parents had earned in their entire lives. The reporters swarmed outside, eager to capture the union of two influential families. Emily, oblivious, smiled brightly, basking in the admiration of the crowd. I smiled too. No one knew the truth. No one knew that the man standing beside her at the altar was the same man she had once destroyed. Nathan Reed. The name meant nothing to her. She thought she was marrying Ethan Graves, CEO of Graves Industries, a self-made billionaire who had risen from obscurity. She thought she was securing her future with a man of power and influence, and she had no idea that the man in front of her was the same boy she had once accused, the boy whose life she had burned to the ground. I had spent a decade reconstructing myself, shaping my new identity, hiding the remnants of the life she had shattered. Now I was richer than her father, more powerful, more dangerous, and she was mine. The wedding ceremony went flawlessly. Emily's hand felt warm in mine as we exchanged vows. "I do," she said sweetly, gazing into my eyes with an expression of trust. It almost made me laugh. "I do," I repeated, sealing her fate. When I kissed her, the crowd erupted into cheers. She pulled me closer, deepening the kiss, her fingers resting against my chest as if she belonged there. She had no idea. The wedding reception was even more extravagant. Guests dined on lobster and filet mignon, toasting to our supposed love with the finest champagne. Emily danced with her father, with friends, with relatives. She glowed, the perfect bride, basking in the attention and admiration. I played my part flawlessly, laughing at the right moments, holding her waist with practiced ease, whispering sweet nothings in her ear. But the moment the reception ended, the moment the last guest left, the act was over. Our honeymoon suite was a lavish penthouse overlooking the city skyline. The room was decorated with red rose petals, soft candlelight flickering in the dimly lit space. A bottle of champagne sat chilling in a silver bucket beside the bed. Emily walked in first, still lost in the fairy tale of the day. She slipped off her heels and stretched, her silk wedding dress shimmering under the golden glow of the lights. "God, what a day," she sighed, turning to me with a radiant smile. "I still can't believe we're married." I said nothing. She walked toward me, her hands reaching for the buttons of my tuxedo. "You've barely said a word since the reception ended." She tilted her head. "Are you tired?" I watched her. For the first time since the night I was arrested, I was truly alone with her. No cameras, no guests, no audience, just her and me. Emily Carter, the woman who had ruined my life. And she had no idea. She smiled up at me, completely unaware of the storm boiling beneath my skin. "Nathan?" The sound of my real name almost made me flinch. She didn't know. She didn't recognize me. But I saw the slight furrow in her brows, the tiny flicker of hesitation in her gaze. Somewhere in the deepest part of her subconscious, something was warning her. Something was telling her that something was wrong. I took a step closer, watching as she instinctively froze. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She leaned into my touch, her lips parting slightly, expecting a kiss. Instead, I bent down, my lips close to her ear, and I whispered, "Do you have any idea how many lives you destroyed?" Emily stilled. The color drained from her face. I pulled back slowly, watching the confusion flicker across her features. "What?" she whispered, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. I smiled, but it wasn't a loving smile. It wasn't the smile of a husband on his wedding night. It was the smile of a man who had waited 10 years for this moment. Her hands, which had been resting on my chest, tensed. For the first time she looked at me, really looked at me. Her pupils dilated, A shiver ran through her body. Recognition didn't hit her yet, but fear did. And that was enough for now. I leaned in once more, placing a soft kiss on her forehead, my lips lingering just a moment too long. "Good night, my love," I murmured. Then I turned away, leaving her standing frozen in the middle of the room, breathless and shaken, with the shadows of my words lingering in the air. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The scream tore through the silence of the night. Emily's scream. It echoed through the vast penthouse, shattering the delicate illusion of a perfect wedding night. I turned slowly. She was standing by the door, her phone clutched so tightly in her trembling hands that her knuckles had turned white. Her breath came in short, choked gasps. No, this isn't real," she whispered, shaking her head. Her eyes darted back to the screen, as if she could will the news away. But it was real. Her family was dead. All of them. The Carters had been slaughtered in their mansion just hours after the wedding reception ended. William Carter. Dead. Her mother, her younger brother, aunts, uncles, the house staff. No survivors. 28 bodies found, poisoned. I watched her crumble, watched her knees give out beneath her as she collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. It was almost poetic. "Nathan," she choked out, her wide, tear-filled eyes finally meeting mine. "Tell me this isn't happening." I didn't answer. Her breath hitched. She felt it then, the shift in the air, the realization. Slowly, she rose to her feet, her body shaking. "You knew," her voice cracked. "Didn't you?" I didn't move. Oh my God. She took a step back, then another. Her chest heaved as she struggled to breathe. Then she ran. I let her. By the time I followed, she was already outside, barefoot on the cold pavement, the silk of her wedding dress dragging behind her. But she wasn't screaming anymore. She was frozen, her breath visible in the cold night air. Because she had seen me, standing in front of her family's estate, holding a canister of gasoline. The Carter mansion loomed behind me, dark and silent, its grand facade now just a tomb for the dead inside. Emily's breath came in short, uneven gasps. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. No. I tilted my head, watching her. She looked so small, so fragile, standing there beneath the glow of the streetlights. I wondered if this was how I had looked 10 years ago, standing in front of that university office, staring at her as my world burned down around me. I took a step forward. She flinched. "You wanted to destroy my life." My voice was calm, almost gentle. "Now I've destroyed yours." Tears spilled down her face. "Nathan, please." I crouched down and set the gas canister aside. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a match. Her breath hitched. The tiny flame flickered to life, dancing in the cold night air. "I lost everything because of you." I rolled the match between my fingers, watching the tiny ember glow. My family, my future, my name. Emily took a slow, shaky step forward, desperation carved into every inch of her face. "You don't have to do this," she pleaded. "Please." I smiled. "But I do." Then I dropped the match. The moment it hit the ground, sirens screamed through the air. Red and blue lights flashed across the pavement, illuminating the terror on Emily's face. The police had arrived. I heard the car doors slam, the shouts, the heavy footsteps pounding against the asphalt. But I didn't run. I never planned to. I simply stood there, watching as the flames licked at the edges of the estate, consuming the legacy of the Carter family. Then the hands grabbed me, wrestled me to the ground. I didn't fight. As they cuffed me, as they shoved me into the back of the police car, I kept my eyes on Emily. She stood motionless, her wedding dress stained with gasoline, her face a mask of horror and disbelief. For the first time in her life, Emily Carter had lost everything, and she knew exactly who had taken it from her. The interrogation room was cold. The metal chair beneath me was uncomfortable, but I barely noticed. The two detectives sat across from me, watching, waiting. I didn't speak. Not when they read me my rights. Not when they asked me why I did it. Not when they told me how many people had died. Not when they said Emily was outside begging to see me. I simply sat there, calm, silent. Because what was there to say? I had already won. The clock on the interrogation room wall ticked steadily. I sat perfectly still, my hands cuffed to the metal table, my expression unreadable. Across from me, Detective James Holloway stared, his fingers tapping a slow, rhythmic beat against the case file in front of him. Beside him, his partner, Detective Ryan Brooks, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. They were waiting for me to speak. I didn't. I had nothing to say. Finally, Holloway exhaled, rubbing a hand down his tired face. "Help me understand, Nathan." His voice was measured, careful. "Why would a man like you, successful, wealthy, throw it all away like this?" I said nothing. Brooks scoffed, shaking his head. "You've got everything a man could want. Money, power, a beautiful wife, and you decide to burn her family alive? Jesus Christ." I tilted my head slightly, watching them. They didn't get it. They never would. Holloway leaned forward, his gaze sharpening. "You planned this, didn't you?" He tapped the file. "You spent years setting this up. You courted Emily, built a new identity, got close enough to strike. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was cold-blooded." I finally smiled, just a little. Holloway's jaw tightened. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said calmly. "I think it's justice." Brooks let out a low whistle. "Jesus, you're a real piece of work." I didn't respond. Holloway sighed, glancing down at the crime scene photos spread across the table. The images of the Carter mansion reduced to ash, of bodies covered in white sheets, of Emily standing barefoot in the wreckage of her old life. His fingers tapped again. A habit, maybe. Or maybe he was trying to keep himself from reaching across the table and slamming my head into it. "You don't seem surprised that we caught you." His voice was quieter now, more observant. "You didn't run. You didn't fight. It's almost like you wanted to get caught." I held his gaze, because I did. I had never intended to walk away from that fire. Whether it was in flames or in handcuffs, I had already won the moment Emily realized the truth. Holloway studied me carefully, and then, after a long pause, he asked, "Was it worth it?" I smiled again. Every second. Outside the interrogation room, Emily Carter sat curled in a stiff plastic chair, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She wasn't crying anymore. Her eyes were dry, red-rimmed, hollow. She had been sitting there for hours, refusing to leave. She needed answers. She needed to understand how the man she married, the man she trusted, had been the same man she had destroyed 10 years ago. A door opened down the hall. Detective Holloway stepped out, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He hesitated for a moment, watching her, before finally speaking. "You should go home, Emily." She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "What home?" Holloway exhaled heavily. "Fair enough." She looked up at him then, searching his face for something, anything, that could explain what had just happened. "Why?" Her voice was hoarse. "Why would he do this?" Holloway hesitated, and then quietly he asked, "Are you sure this isn't karma catching up to you?" Emily flinched as if she had been slapped. "Excuse me?" Holloway didn't look away. "He wasn't some random killer, Emily. He was Nathan Reed." Her breath caught. "You remember him, don't you?" His voice was calm, but there was something sharp underneath it. "The boy you accused 10 years ago? The boy whose life you ruined?" Emily's lips parted, her face pale. "No," she whispered, "that's not. He can't be." But she knew. She knew. It made sense now. The way he had looked at her on their wedding night, the way he had whispered those chilling words in her ear. "Do you have any idea how many lives you destroyed?" Her stomach twisted violently. Holloway watched her carefully. "You lied, didn't you?" His voice was too even. 10 years ago. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. But she couldn't say it, because saying it would mean admitting it. It would mean acknowledging that everything Nathan said about her was true. That she had destroyed him. That she had created the monster sitting in that interrogation room. And now, she was the one left with nothing. In the small, sterile holding cell, I sat alone. A single dim light flickered above me. The air was thick with the scent of burnt fabric, gasoline, and victory. The door buzzed open. I didn't have to look up to know it was her. Slowly, hesitantly, Emily stepped inside. For the first time, there was no confidence in her posture, no arrogance in her expression. She stood there, gripping the bars between us like they were the only thing keeping her upright. Her wedding ring, the symbol of the lies she had lived, glinted under the light. I smiled. She finally spoke. "Why?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I tilted my head. "Why do you think?" Her fingers curled around the bars, her knuckles white. I didn't know. The words tumbled out of her. "Nathan, I didn't." I leaned forward. "Yes, you did." She stopped breathing. "You knew exactly what you were doing." I let the silence settle, let the truth crush her. Then, finally, I spoke again. "How does it feel, Emily?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I watched her, taking in the shock, the guilt, the sheer devastation on her face. And then softly, almost gently, I whispered, "Now we're even." I wasn't surprised when they moved me to solitary confinement. They didn't trust me around the other inmates. Didn't trust me around anyone, really. Not that I cared. I sat on the cold metal cot, my back against the wall, staring at the ceiling as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I had been in worse places. I had survived worse things. I closed my eyes, listening to the faint echoes of the prison beyond my cell. Footsteps, voices, the distant clang of metal doors. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered what Emily was doing right now. Was she still at the station? Had she gone back to whatever was left of her life? Had she looked at the bodies yet? A small, satisfied smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. It didn't matter. No amount of screaming or crying would bring them back, and no amount of begging would save her now. "We need to talk about the autopsy report." Detective Holloway's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension beneath it. Emily sat across from him, her hands trembling in her lap. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. The blood on her wedding dress had dried hours ago, but she hadn't bothered to change. She just sat there, staring at the table, barely breathing. Holloway pushed a thick folder toward her. They were dead before the fire started. Emily's head snapped up. For a moment, she didn't seem to understand what he had just said. "What?" Holloway opened the file, flipping through the pages. "Your family, the Carters, they were poisoned before the fire. A lethal mix of pesticides, sedatives, and carbon monoxide. Whoever did this made sure they didn't stand a chance." Emily's lips parted, her face going pale. She shook her head. "That doesn't—" "Nathan set the fire. I saw him." "Nathan set the fire," Holloway agreed, "but your family was already dead by then." Silence. Emily's hands curled into fists. "You think someone else was involved?" Holloway exhaled sharply. "We're starting to." "Do you know what this means?" Detective Brooks was pacing now, his agitation clear. Holloway didn't answer. He just kept staring at the crime scene photos spread out on the desk. The fire had destroyed everything, but the bodies had told a different story. The toxins in their systems, the methodical way they had been silenced before the flames even touched them. "Nathan planned this for 10 years, Brooks continued. "But this is different. This is precise. This is clinical." "Nathan's smart," Holloway said quietly. "But this feels like something else." Brooks let out a harsh laugh. "You think he had help?" Holloway finally looked up. And for the first time, Brooks saw something in his partner's expression that made his stomach turn. Doubt. Emily didn't remember how she got back to her hotel, didn't remember getting into the car, or checking in, or walking up to the room. Her head was buzzing, her hands numb. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, her mind spinning. Her family had been poisoned. Poisoned before Nathan set the fire. Which meant her stomach twisted. She had spent the last 24 hours convinced that Nathan had done all of this alone, that this had been his revenge, his way of making her suffer. But if her family had already been dead before he even arrived at the mansion, who had killed them? Her breath hitched. And why? The thought made her dizzy. Because if someone else had done this, if someone else had wanted her family dead, then what the hell had she just walked into? So, Nathan. Detective Holloway's voice was calm, measured. I lifted my head, meeting his gaze through the interrogation room glass. You poisoned them before you burned them alive? I smiled lazily. Is that what you think? Holloway didn't blink. It's what the evidence says. I leaned forward slightly, resting my cuffed hands on the table. And here I thought I was already convicted. Holloway's eyes narrowed. You're not denying it. I tilted my head. Why would I? His jaw tightened. Because something about this doesn't add up. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, the poison, the method, the timing. He leaned in. This wasn't just revenge, Nathan. This was execution, and not just any execution, a clean one. He paused. Too clean for a man with a grudge. I chuckled softly. You think I'm not capable of planning? Holloway didn't flinch. I think you didn't do this alone. The smile lingered on my lips. Interesting theory. Holloway's gaze sharpened. So tell me, Nathan, who else wanted the Carters dead? I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the cold metal of the table. Then I leaned back, a slow smirk spreading across my face. That's the real question, isn't it? Emily Carter had spent her entire life believing she was untouchable. That money could fix anything, that power could protect her. But as she sat alone in that cold, unfamiliar hotel room, staring at the city lights beyond the window, she realized something. She wasn't the only one who had secrets. And for the first time in her life, she was terrified. Emily sat in the cold interrogation room, her hands clasped together in her lap. She had stopped crying hours ago. Now, she just felt numb. Detective Holloway sat across from her, flipping through the thick case file. He wasn't in a rush. He was letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of everything that had happened sink into her bones. She hated it. She hated the way he looked at her, like he was waiting. Finally, he spoke. Let's talk about 10 years ago. Her stomach clenched. She hadn't expected that. Her gaze snapped up to meet his. What does that have to do with anything? Holloway leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Everything. Emily swallowed hard. Nathan Reed, you accused him of assault. She flinched at the name. She couldn't help it. Nathan. Her husband. Her monster. She shook her head quickly. I don't see how that's relevant. Don't you? Holloway cut in smoothly. He flipped to a page in the file and turned it toward her. A photograph. Nathan Reed, age 19. Mugshot. Eyes hollow, face blank. Emily's breath caught. She had forgotten. Forgotten what he had looked like back then, before he had rebuilt himself, before he had become the man she had married, before she had turned him into this. Walk me through that night, Holloway said. Emily's hands clenched into fists. I already told the story. Tell it again. She hesitated. For 10 years, she had buried that night so deep in her memory that it had become a blur. But now, sitting here staring at Nathan's face, it was coming back. Slowly. Too slowly. It had been a party. She remembered that much. A fraternity house, loud music, too many drinks. She had been drunk, laughing, her arms around someone's neck. But who? The memory was fuzzy. Had it been Nathan? No. No, he had been somewhere else. She hadn't even noticed him until later. What she did remember was the panic. Waking up with a splitting headache. Someone shaking her, someone saying, "You have to do something." Emily's brows furrowed. Who had said that? She could almost hear the voice, low, urgent, familiar, but it wouldn't come back to her. Holloway was watching her closely. Emily? She blinked rapidly, shaking her head. I don't know. Yes, you do. She swallowed hard. Memories blurred, twisted. She had been crying. Someone had told her, no one will believe you unless you act now. Act, act. Her breath hitched. The accusation hadn't been her idea. It had been someone else's. But who? Who had told her to lie? Holloway saw the exact moment realization hit her. Saw the way her eyes widened, her body stiffened, her breathing turned shallow. Good. He leaned in slightly. Who helped you, Emily? Her lips parted, but no words came out. because she didn't know. Or maybe she did. And she just couldn't remember. Not yet. Holloway sat back, watching her carefully. Figure it out. Because until she did, she wasn't just a victim in this story, she was a pawn. And she didn't even know who had been playing her all along. I had spent 10 years building this moment. 10 years reconstructing myself from the ashes of the life Emily Carter burned to the ground. Every move, every carefully calculated decision, all of it was for this. I had spent 10 years becoming someone she could love, someone she could trust. And then, on our wedding night, I watched the realization break her from the inside out. It had been perfect. Almost. Until the autopsy reports came in. Until the police started asking the wrong questions. Until I realized I wasn't the only one who wanted Emily Carter's family dead. The interrogation room was colder today. Or maybe I just felt it more now. Detective Holloway sat across from me, flipping through his notes. He looked different, more focused, more certain. He wasn't trying to figure out what I had done anymore. He was trying to figure out what I hadn't. Tell me about the poison. I smiled lazily. I thought we already established that I burned them alive. Holloway didn't blink. They were dead before the fire. I shrugged. He leaned forward. That wasn't your plan, was it? I tilted my head slightly. What makes you say that? Holloway tapped a finger against the file. Because you wanted Emily to suffer. You wanted her to watch everything she loved go up in flames. But she never got the chance, did she? I didn't answer. Holloway nodded to himself. Because by the time you got there, they were already gone. Silence. Then, a low chuckle slipped past my lips. Not because he was wrong, but because he was right. I leaned forward, resting my cuffed hands on the table. Tell me, detective, if I wasn't the one who killed them, who do you think did? Holloway didn't react. He just watched me, waiting. But he wasn't going to get anything from me. Not yet. Because for the first time in 10 years, I didn't have all the answers. And that was a problem. Emily sat in the hotel room, staring blankly at the floor. She hadn't moved in hours, hadn't spoken, had barely breathed. Because it didn't make sense. Nathan had spent a decade planning his revenge. She could feel it in every step he had taken, in every carefully placed move. But he hadn't poisoned them. He had wanted them alive, to burn. Which meant someone else had gotten to them first. Someone who wanted them dead for a different reason. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She didn't know who she was calling until she heard the dial tone. Then, Emily? She flinched at the voice. Detective Holloway. She swallowed hard. I need to see Nathan. Silence. Then, why? Her fingers clenched around the phone. Her voice came out hoarse. Because I think we've both been played. I was wrong. For 10 years, I believed I had control. I believed I had orchestrated every step, every move, every whispered lie that led Emily Carter to the edge of destruction. But now, sitting in this cold interrogation room, staring at the man standing across from me, I realized I was never in control at all. Detective Holloway hadn't spoken in 5 minutes. Neither had I. Because the man standing on the other side of the glass, the man who had just walked into the police station and confessed, I knew him. Daniel Carter, Emily's uncle. The only member of the Carter family who hadn't been in that house when it burned. He looked calm, collected, like a man who had already accepted his fate. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers curling into fists beneath the table. I had planned for everything. I had prepared for every reaction, every consequence, every outcome. Except this. Except for someone else beating me to the kill. I wasn't sure whether to be furious or impressed. Emily sat in a different room, across from a different detective. She wasn't crying anymore. She just stared at the man she had once called Uncle Danny, her lips slightly parted, her breath slow and unsteady. He didn't look at her, didn't say her name, didn't offer a single excuse. Because he didn't need to. Emily understood now. This had never been about her. Not really. Nathan's revenge? That was personal. That was pain and hate sharpened into something cruel and methodical. But her family's deaths? That was something bigger. Something planned long before Nathan ever stepped back into her life. Her fingers curled into her lap. Why? Daniel Carter finally looked at her. His expression was unreadable. You already know why, Emily. And deep down, she did. I was brought back to my cell before I could get any more answers. Not that I needed them. The pieces had already started falling into place. The poison, the timing, the fact that Daniel Carter had walked in and confessed without a moment's hesitation. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't about me. This was a business move. I had wanted Emily to suffer. Daniel Carter had wanted the Carter empire to burn. And somehow, in the chaos of it all, we had both gotten exactly what we wanted, without ever realizing we weren't the only ones playing the game. I let out a slow, quiet laugh, shaking my head. I had spent 10 years believing I was the one pulling the strings. But now I wasn't so sure. Because if Daniel Carter had been willing to destroy his own bloodline, then maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there. The timing, the method, the way everything had unraveled so perfectly, as if someone had been pulling the strings from the very beginning. I had spent 10 years believing I was the architect of Emily Carter's destruction. But I was wrong. I wasn't the mastermind. I was just a pawn. Emily sat across from Richard Carter, her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. She had barely looked at him since he walked into the room. Couldn't. Because if she did, if she let herself truly see him, she might lose control. And Richard Carter would love that. He leaned back in his chair, watching her with mild amusement. You always were too soft, Emily. Her jaw tightened. You killed them. He smiled. Of course, I did. Her stomach twisted violently. She had known, somewhere, deep down she had known. Daniel Carter had confessed to covering it up, to knowing what was coming and doing nothing to stop it. But Richard, he had been the one to poison their drinks, to watch them die one by one as the sedatives took hold. And then, when the house was silent, he had stepped outside, called his brother, and told him not to come home. Just like that, 28 people gone, and he hadn't even blinked. Emily's nails dug into her palms. Why? Richard sighed, as if the answer should have been obvious. Because they were in my way. Emily stared at him. They were your family. He laughed. And now, so is their fortune. The word sent a shiver through her spine. Because it was true. The Carter empire belonged to him now. The will had been rewritten months ago, leaving everything to Richard in the event of William Carter's death. And now there was no one left to contest it. No one but Emily. She swallowed hard. And Nathan? Richard smirked. Oh, Nathan made things so much easier. Emily's breath caught. You used him. Richard shrugged. I gave him exactly what he wanted. A reason to set that fire. A reason to destroy you. Emily's vision blurred. Nathan had believed this was his plan, that he had spent 10 years crafting her downfall. But all along, someone else had been using him too, and he never even saw it. When they put me in the same room as Emily, I expected her to be furious. I expected her to scream, to throw accusations, to remind me that I was the reason she had nothing left. Instead, she just stared at me for a long time, and then, finally, you didn't kill them. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair. No, I didn't. She didn't look relieved, didn't look grateful, just tired. She nodded once, then she stood, and without another word, she walked out, leaving me behind, again. The courtroom was silent. A silence so thick it felt like the walls were closing in, swallowing everything whole. Richard Carter stood at the defense table, his expression unreadable, as the judge read the verdict. For the premeditated murder of 28 individuals. Emily sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wasn't shaking, wasn't crying. There was nothing left inside her to break. Richard Carter, you are hereby sentenced to death by lethal injection. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. A slow, strangled sound. Richard didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't so much as blink. He just turned his head slightly, eyes flicking toward Emily, and smiled. Her stomach twisted, because she knew that even as he was being dragged from the courtroom in chains, he had already won. The Carter family was gone, their empire destroyed. And Emily? She was nothing now. Just another ghost left in the ruins. Nathan Reed was sentenced next. He sat in the defendant's chair, shoulders relaxed, as if the entire proceeding bored him. Nathan Reed, you are found guilty of attempted arson and reckless endangerment. Emily's breath hitched. However, given the circumstances surrounding this case, the court has decided to offer leniency. A murmur spread through the crowd. The judge's voice remained steady. You are hereby sentenced to 6 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 3. 3 years. That was all he would serve for everything. For her ruined life. For the flames that nearly consumed everything. For the way he had played her. And yet, she didn't feel relief. Didn't feel anything at all. Nathan glanced her way as they led him out of the courtroom. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes she never expected. Not hatred, not victory, just emptiness. She left town the next day. No goodbyes, no final words, just a suitcase and a one-way ticket to somewhere that didn't feel like ashes. She didn't cry, didn't flinch as she stepped onto the train, staring at the blurred landscape beyond the window. There was nothing left behind worth mourning. Her family was gone. Nathan was gone. The girl she used to be? She had died long before them, so she left. And didn't look back. Nathan stood at the window of his cell, watching the sun dip below the horizon. He had spent 10 years imagining what this moment would feel like. The moment Emily Carter was finally ruined. The moment he had won. But as he stared at the empty space she had left behind, all he felt was nothing. Just another ghost. Just another ruin. And maybe, just maybe, they had both lost.